This is Bonehead Weekly. Welcome.
Last week,
Yes,
we had
Last week,
part one of our interview with,
Steve Mitchell.
there you
thank you. I
go.
was going to say Mr. Mitchell, but I was trying to let you all be
Mr.
involved.
Steve Mitchell.
We talked to him about his work in comic books, how he went over to animation, and this week we'll be finishing the interview with him talking about his work with King Cohen, and which is a documentary he made about Larry Cohen, and some other fascinating things, as well as ending on what he is going to be working on next, which actually will be leading into another documentary as well that you'll want to check out. So,
Which will actually be hopefully leading into part 3 of our Steve Mitchell. I mean, he's a fascinating guy because we've never interviewed someone before who was successful at something else. It's like, I'm gonna go out to Hollywood while I'm doing this successful thing and still made a living to become successful in something. A totally different industry.
and as you heard last week, he's our first guest that ever had his own trading card.
Yeah, we
I
never
mean-
had a trading card. We don't even have one of those Funko Pops or anything.
No. I mean, if you would like to make a customized Funko Pop,
Well, Joe, I'm sure there's a
any-
Pavarotti Funko head that you could say is me as you.
No, I was gonna
It's
say,
a little
no.
easy joke to go here, but I'm just
Here.
gonna let it go. Keep going.
here,
Dave.
here. Look, as we
In all
get ready
fairness,
for this
somebody could have a Professor Xavier and go, "Oh, there's Chad."
every
I'm not going to go with Professor X. Keep going, James.
as we head into this episode, which you should check out, we'll also make this offer. If you happen to be into custom modeling and you model or you alter 3 Funko Pops into the Boneheads, I'll make this deal right now. The first person that does it will actually buy a copy of King Cohen and
give it to you. Yeah, we'll give you a copy of that. And
you have to send us a photo. We'll post it on Twitter.
And
The
one of us
first
will also
person-
have sex with you. You don't get to choose which one.
It'll be Joe.
It is not going to be Joe. Well, it might
not
be.
gonna
I don't
be
know. It
me.
depends on who does it.
It's not going to be me.
It could be. One
No,
of us
it's
has
probably
to do
not.
it.
I didn't make that part of the deal.
Well, you just heard it come out of my mouth, son. You're already signed up.
No, that's
Come
not how
on.
that works.
That's
We are a
exactly how that
limited
works.
liability corporation.
This is
and
now.
I'm not taking
we
that
are
liability.
we are LL something, and you're going to LLA somebody.
I'm more going to be like LL Bean gone.
And on that note, enjoy part 2
Here
of Steve Mitchell.
Yeah. So you get this, and then you start writing. Where does the producing and the behind the scenes? And I'm assuming you're a big Bond fan too.
Oh yeah, no, I'm an enormous Bond fan. In fact, I saw From Russia with Love with my dad when it was originally released. I'll never forget. It was a Sunday afternoon. My dad said, "Come on, we're going to the movies." Well, I don't know. I think it was maybe 9, maybe 10. I don't know. But if my dad said we're going to the movies, I went. It wasn't like, what are we going to go see?
Yeah.
There's none of that. And then he took me to see From Russia with Love, which I went out of my mind for. I think that was the movie that told me that I was straight, because when I saw Daniela Bianchi,
There was no doubt.
Your nightgown type of thing, I'm feeling stuff that I didn't know I was supposed to be able to feel. I was kind of going, oh yeah, okay, and so yeah, and again, people don't know this, or people who are younger than I am forget that if you wanted to see a movie again, there's no going to the shelf. You had to go to the theater. And then because the Bond movies were so popular, they were often reissued as double features between the new ones.
Mhm.
And when I was living at home, every single time a Bond movie came out, my dad would just say, "Come on, we're going to the Bond movie." And my brother was too young to go with us, and my mother didn't care, but we went, and it was this father and son bonding, in pun intended,
That's fantastic.
experience. And so, yeah, I still love those pictures today.
Well, I know you worked on some of the special features, and I was wondering if that's how the work came about, if it was just accidental, or if you were just going after. You
I
understand
think
my
my
question?
career is semi-accidental.
No, really?
Well, kind of. I would think that you're getting sort of a picture of that, or
Yeah.
I knew. My buddy Steve Rubin called me up one day and said, "I hear that they're putting Combat out on DVD." Now, Steve was a really good film journalist. I had done some film journalism in New York as well, another one of
Mhm.
my wrinkles, partly because I realized if I did some of that, one, I could make extra money, and B, it got me on the screening lists of all the studios. So I
That's
saw
our dream.
it was great. It
That is
was
our
great.
dream.
I
We
could
don't
go,
want ever want to make a. We know we're never going to make a dime. We would just be fine on the screener list and some just of, oh look, exit this so we could just show it.
yeah. And well, I actually was writing for a couple of film magazines. Again, not with any sort of real zeal, but it was kind of a secondary thing I could do while I was doing comics. But I got to see everything, more or less for free. And it was, saved me a lot of money, I'll tell you that. And so where was I going with this? Oh, Steve Rubin. Yeah.
Yeah,
So Steve is a guy who had written for Cine Fantastique, and I met at a convention. He was also a PR guy, and he was promoting the Donald Sutherland Invasion of the Body Snatchers picture. He was
the
going around at
Kaufman one. Yeah.
conventions, and we got to know each other. And again, it's a whole kindred spirits thing where you start talking. Yeah, I love that, and I love this, and I love that, and we had again a lot of stuff in common. One of which was the combat TV series, which again
Hmm.
I watched with my dad as a kid. Um, because they were running around shooting guns every week, and so when you're young, you got to love that. And um and he said that Image is doing these, we should call them up and try and do extras. Now I hadn't had any thought about doing that kind of work, but because it was combat, I said yeah. And I had, I'd done a lot of magazine interviews and stuff like that, so I felt I was capable of doing it. And we called them up and they said sure, it'd be great, we're not going to pay you, we'll give you a little swag, and that'll be it. And so what I did was a bunch of interviews with people, and we did sort of a 20-minute doc, which I cut at Image with one of their in-house guys. And then we got a bunch of people to come in and do commentary tracks.
Hmm.
And I was very proud of what we were able to do, because we got a bunch of people who've never done anything, like Sutton Rowley, who I don't know if you know his work as a TV director, but
No,
he's
I'm not familiar with him. Please.
really talented. Look up his IMDb page, and he worked on everything.
Yeah.
But his combat work was especially good. He was great with lenses. His camera was very interesting. And so we got Sutton. Richard Donner had done one episode of the show. We got him. Guys like Ted Post, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And then the coup was I got Robert Altman to talk to me about two shows. Altman was one of the original directing loop on that show.
I
Because
didn't know that.
Combat was originally produced like a movie,
Hmm.
where the director oftentimes was the producer. And Burt Kennedy, who wrote and directed, he was almost sometimes a trifecta. And I said to them, I said, I think I can get Robert Altman to talk. I'd have to fly back to New York. And they said, go get him. And I got to, I got Altman to sit down and watch two of his shows. Now, what was interesting, was interesting to me was I had no bona fides as an expert on the show, except I knew a lot about the show.
Right. Just a fan. Yeah.
And but I didn't know how to sell myself, so I was essentially the invisible interviewer. And it seemed like the people that I was interviewing on the tracks were doing a monologue, and they were very happy at Image, and but they still weren't going to pay anything. So I said, all right, I'll produce some commentaries, but I'm not going to do filmmaking for free.
Yep.
So in season 2 and 3, I produced the commentary tracks as well. Ruben kind of went away, not for any malice or anything like that, but there was nothing really in it for him.
Yeah.
But I said, well, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear the anecdotes first.
Because you're a fan. Back to what we were talking
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
exactly. You guys know exactly what I'm
Mhm.
talking about. So anyway, I was talking to one of the few female writers on the show, a woman named Esther Mitchell, no relation, although her husband, Bob, that was my dad's first name. So every week I'd be watching the show, and every once in a while they'd write a script and his name would be on the screen. I'd say, "So how's the script this week, Dad?" What do I know? I was an idiot kid. But one of the editors up there was listening to me chat them up and said, "You've got a halfway decent voice, and they seem very relaxed if you take the formalness out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind being on the track?" And I said, "No, I don't mind at all. If it's going to make it easier for you guys, I just have to justify myself." And then I just sort of thought of this intro where I would say, "Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Mitchell, DVD special feature producer for Combat season 3, 2." And I would just introduce myself as having that job. And that, in my mind, validated me. And I think I was able to hold my own. And so the commentaries became very chatty. They weren't, they I tried to, I learned a very interesting trick is you have to take something that's formal-ish and turn it into a chat or a conversation. Like if you guys were doing a commentary track,
Yeah.
like what we're doing now,
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation. And so I got on the microphone, I think it might have been in season 3. And then I did the seasons 4 and 5. And then because they were successful, they were also paying me a bit to produce film and docu stuff. And because of Combat, I got my feet wet as a commentator or commentarian, if that's even a word. And then
Works for me.
also basically it gave me a chance to do filmmaking.
Yeah.
And so that was very important to me. And I'm sorry, I just got distracted by the clock here. So let me just move a little faster.
That's okay.
Um, and when I was working for Image, they were very happy with what I was doing, and that's where I first got my idea for King Cohen. It wasn't called King Cohen; it was a Larry Cohen documentary because I realized I said, I need to sort of maybe do my own stuff, and but in the meantime, and they said, "Gee, sounds great. Maybe we'll acquire it once you make it." I was looking for them to finance it. And I'm sure you've talked to a lot of guests where they say, getting money is the absolute toughest part of the business.
Oh, brother. Well,
Yeah.
and this is something we talk about with a lot of filmmakers now. It's never been easier to make a movie. It's never been harder to make a buck at it.
And to get bucks to make it in the first place.
Yeah, it's never been harder.
And so the Larry Cohen thing got backburnered for me, but I continued to do extras, and I did things like Never Say Never Again, Casino Royale. Um, I did a few other things which I can't remember right now. Oh, I worked on Sleeper Cell. I did a few other things, but it was tough to do that kind of work because the money wasn't really there, the budgets weren't there.
Yeah. Well,
And go ahead.
well, no, I was going to say before we start on King Cohen, I've got a really different question because I kind of want to end with because we love the documentary.
Oh, thank you very
And
much.
and what I want to ask is I feel like you're one of those guys. I'm sitting there looking at your IMDb, was researching stuff, James researched some stuff, Chad did too. And I'm sitting there going, I just don't think this represents your body of work. And I'm curious, how much have you ghost written on? How much have you done that's nowhere even near being listed?
What's interesting is I did ghostwrite a movie or two for Jim, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a number of scripts that weren't produced.
Yeah.
And I still, things I wrote on spec for myself and things I wrote on spec for money.
Yep.
Um, being a freelancer, sometimes you have highs and lows, you have busy periods, you have uh, not busy periods. My comics career ended in the beginning of the twos
Mm-hmm.
because I think I was fired because of ageism. One day I was in the business and then I wasn't. And that, I have to say, that was a low point for me because I'm going, well, wait a second. I also worked on the Spawn animated series as a
Yeah.
storyboard guy. And my interest in inking comics was on the decline. If I was with the right penciler, I would have fun. If I was with the wrong penciler, it was work.
Mm-hmm.
Comics was never work for me when I was enjoying it. But I, and the in the beginning of the 21st century, I was trying to transition out of comics and into other things, and it's tough. I got a crash course in finding out how hard it is to get money for a project.
Yeah.
And so I had a number of scripts that I got paid for that didn't get produced. I had ideas for things that I couldn't get off the ground. And it was hard then, and it's much harder now. You know, God, I miss the 80s. We had
Mhm.
go picture in a week. That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, if you're a name, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but not for, you know, working class schmucks like myself.
I think it's only 3 or 4 people in the whole business, less than a half a dozen that happens. That with that name of that you're just able to, and then it's a go thing in a week. You know,
Yeah, and one of the things that I learned was this very interesting turn of phrase was we said, well, I mean, at one point I had written a feature length version of Combat as a
Mhm.
you know, and John Dahl, who is an excellent director,
Yep.
Yes.
Red Rock West.
he primarily was making a living as um, a high end cable episodic guy,
Yeah.
primarily because I think he wanted to stay in Los Angeles. But he was getting the cream of the shows that were being done then, and I'm sure he still does. He's a wonderful director.
Mhm.
And he did a lot of the great, some of the best Dexter episodes.
That's what I
Oh,
was thinking, Chad.
Dexter's so
Thank you for
great.
bringing
I
that
mean,
up.
any if you look at his IMDb, you just look at his credits, and it's just all
Yeah.
great shows.
Mhm.
And we had a meeting with him. We approached him, and he really was interested. And I said, well, John Dahl kind of matters. And then we tried to present that to feature people who I think actually knew his features, and they knew he was a good feature director too. And they say, well, he doesn't mean anything. Well, one of the things that you may not have heard is that, you know, people say in April of, let's say, 2020, so and so doesn't mean anything. And
Mhm.
then by March of 2021, that person is the hottest director on the planet,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So I always thought it was a load of shit
It is a
whenever
load of
I
shit.
heard that, you know, because the thing is, talent is talent, except in Hollywood. And, you know, it's one of those weird things where Hollywood used to be a meritocracy, except when you're trying to make a deal.
Yeah.
You know, when I grew up as a fan, I would always go and see films by people whose work I admired. And that was DPs, composers, actors, directors. It didn't matter. If good people were involved in a project, I would want to see it.
Yep.
And that's changed.
Yeah. Well, we're in the interest of time. Let's start talking about King Cohen. How
Yeah, I mean,
just
I got a little more time than I said, but I just need a, you know, so let's do it.
yeah. Well, and because I want to talk about, you've got the Blu-ray out, right?
Yeah, my partners and I, one of my partners is a guy named Matt Verbois, and he's the co-owner of La La Land Records, which is this great collector's soundtrack label. And
Mm-hmm.
you can get King Cohen on Blu-ray through La La Land, or I think on Amazon. And and if you like King Cohen, the reason to have the Blu-ray is this: when I was when I was interviewing Larry alone, I think I got 16, 17 hours of
And we're going to
content.
get to that in a second.
And
Go
so
ahead.
we've got about, I think, 45 or 50 minutes of Larry stories that were too involved to put in the feature, because when you're cutting a feature, you're cutting it as an entity. You're not cutting it as a special features kind of thing where you're just trying to have interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different approach to editing altogether, but these were good stories. And then there's other stories from other people that we talked to. So there's about an hour and 15, an hour and 20 minutes worth of extra material. And then there's also the score as a separate CD by Joe Kramer.
Yeah.
So if you like the movie, it's worth getting, or at the very least borrowing.
We love the movie, but I've got to get the Blu-ray. I'm going to get the Blu-ray. I just why Larry? I know why I would have done it, but why did you do it? And I know it's a very simplistic question.
My very initial impulse was I was a fan of his,
Yeah.
and I occasionally was hearing commentaries from him, I think in the laser and early DVD days. And I I knew his story, and it's interesting how his story is a little parallel to mine because he grew up in New York City, loved New
Mhm.
York City, and then moved to Los Angeles and fell in love with Los Angeles. And I remember reading an interview with him one day. He said, "I love living in LA, but I love working in New York." And I said, "I get that." Now,
Mhm.
I haven't had that ability to do it quite like he did, but it's a parallel thing. Also, Larry was a movie nut, I was a movie nut. I just felt kind of a kinship to him. And also, I like independent movies. I like movies that sit in the middle. I also don't mind low budget movies if they're interesting.
Mhm.
And Larry had all of that. And then I think, Roger had also gotten a lot of attention because he was this you know B movie impresario genius, and I think he was. But the difference is Larry wrote his stuff. Larry was a triple hyphenate,
Right.
and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. At the end of all of Larry's movies, he'll have a single card that says a Larry Cohen film. That card is earned. Larry wrote it, he directed it, and he produced it. If you like it, it's all because of Larry. If you don't like it, it's all because of Larry.
Yep.
And he just seemed like he was a ripe topic for me.
I agree with that because you're absolutely right. It's probably the same thing in comics where Stan gets all this attention and no one's trying to, well, there are people who try to take it away, but there's so many other folks out there who had such a large impact, right? And they don't get as much attention. And Larry Cohen is one of those people who started writing in television, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember, and then just kind of built a very
He had a
independent movie empire, for lack of a better word. I mean, his
successful,
damn house was the set in so many movies.
and boy, it was weird to go to that house the first time.
Was it?
Yeah, because I'm going, wait a second, I've been here. Kind of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was watching your documentary, and I'm going to get the movies all screwed up. But I didn't realize how often you saw it.
Yeah, well, I think it's in the movie. It said Larry liked shooting his house because he could get up in the morning and not commute to the set.
But
And he strangely made it work. I think most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah, yes, but
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 go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think that the documentary worked on me as well because it's got a lot of heart. Like it actually took me a couple moments when, talking about working with these older actors, and I think there's a part in the film where, who has a mortgage to pay, who is just looking for work, who is, and I think about that because I do think that there's so much talent that is out there, kind of alluding to what Joe was saying, that they are still phenomenally talented, but they don't get the press. And to see that, it was just fascinating. And there's so much heart in your documentary. So it's just, even if you're not familiar with Larry Cohen, and you will be after you watch the documentary, there's just something about what he did outside of even the films, about what he valued, and those values show up in the films, but the documentary really shows that. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. That was
Oh, well,
fascinating to
I
see.
appreciate that. It's interesting when you make a movie like that, there is no script. It's a lot of hunting and gathering. So you
yeah,
start with, let me get this in the frame. You start out with this much stuff, and then you gotta bring it down to about that much stuff. And Larry, God, I miss him. He said, "Oh, you didn't include all of my plays." Larry, I said, Larry, I couldn't, I had no cutaways. I didn't have any footage. He said, well,
right.
does it make any difference? I said, Larry, I'm sorry. He says, oh, you should have done a mini series. And I said,
Yeah,
Larry always gave me a hard time about everything, but I adored him. And what was nice was going to a lot of festivals with him and getting to see him get curtain calls.
yep.
When you're an actor in the theater, you get a curtain call every night. When you're a filmmaker, you don't. But um, the movie, I found the movie in the editing room,
Hmm.
and I knew I was going to do a story about a guy's career, and each of the movies that I focused on revealed something to me and hopefully to the audience about who he was. I said to my editor in the beginning, I said, we're making a movie about this guy, and we're going to talk about his head, his heart, and his balls. And basically I think we managed to do that.
You did, because he had some cojones,
That big. And
brother. He told
and
some people to go fuck themselves that I wouldn't have done. I would have been like, no, I want to make a living. I wouldn't have
Larry,
had I wouldn't have had that kind of confidence in myself to go that much on my own. I would have been, no, please, I'll work for the studio.
Larry is one of those guys who had an extraordinary belief in himself. And, they say that you need 2 out of 3 to be successful: luck, timing, or talent. And Larry had all three. He was lucky, the timing was perfect, and he had
Mm-hmm.
the talent. And the belief in himself. And we talked about a lot of things that were sort of maybe not as charitable or a little darker. And I said I didn't want to do that. I wanted to celebrate what he did.
Yeah.
But the secondary theme of the movie is celebrating the time of what he did. I think that period in the 70s, well, everybody talks about the 70s as being a great
Mm-hmm.
time for movies, and I agree with that. Those were my formative years as a fan. My second favorite movie is The French Connection, which should tell you a lot right there.
Yeah.
Uh,
And but the when Larry did what he did was worth celebrating as well. And Larry, God, Larry loved old Hollywood. He loved old Hollywood. I think his personal favorite movie is The Private Lives of J. Edgar Hoover, which is maybe one of the harder movies of his to see. It's not on Blu-ray. I think it was an on-demand DVD,
Right.
but it's packed with old Hollywood people. And Larry actually got to shoot at MGM. And I think Larry always felt he was born too late. I think Larry wanted to be like Michael Curtiz or Raoul Walsh or one of those guys who worked for the studios under the studio system. And his way of sort of experiencing that was shooting on lots sometimes and then working with people that he loved as a fan.
Right. But I've got now I've got Broderick Crawford question. Sorry. What I was going to
He was drunk a lot. Okay.
well, I get that. But so watching it, I was sitting here going, he's got a lot of great people. I'm curious, who did you not get that you really wished you could have? Mine would have been Sam Fuller, but that's impossible.
He was kind of dead.
That's what I'm saying. I just said that's impossible. I read his book too, is The Fourth Face, I
It's a
think.
great book. It's a
Yeah.
great. I'm a big fan of Sam Fuller's, and Larry's house used to belong to Sam Fuller.
Oh, I did. Is that in the document? I don't remember that. I didn't know
I
that.
don't know if we put it in there or not.
I don't think that's in there, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, his house used to belong to Sam Fuller. So, and each decade sort of had a hyphenate. Sam Fuller was a 50s,
Mm-hmm.
60s hyphenate. Larry was a 60s, 70 hyphenate, and now I guess Quentin Tarantino is the current big hyphenate. But there are not a lot of those guys.
No.
I don't have many regrets about King Cohen. I do feel that I may have screwed up in a couple of situations. One, I really should have chased Tony LoBianco harder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for two reasons. One, he's in God Told Me To, and two, he's in The French Connection, for crying out loud, and the Seven Ups, which is another favorite of mine.
Yeah.
And
I just saw that last year, by the way.
Oh,
I'd
7
never
Up
seen
is
it
great.
before.
I love it. Best car-on-car chase ever done, I think.
Really?
Yeah, because it's New York City. There are too many things that can go wrong when you're having a car chase. So it's great, and it's art in terms of the route that chase takes. It's more or less accurate.
Oh.
Anyway, so I wish I'd pushed harder for Tony LoBianco. I wish I had pushed harder for Joel Schumacher, but at the time he was going through some very embarrassing bad press about his sexual interests, let's say.
Oh, I
We would
didn't
talk
know that, but we have a great Joel Schumacher story we can tell you after this is over if you'd like.
Yeah. So, but I think I would have liked to have had Joel. We did try and get Quentin Tarantino, but he just wasn't available to us. Um, but I have to say that I'm pretty happy with the
I
cast.
am too. It's one of those because we've made short films and it's not that we understand completely, but we can empathize of, it's never enough, right?
No,
There's
it's
not
never.
so much, there's not so much that it's completed, it's just abandoned at some point, right? That you
Well,
try.
I used to have a professor that when I was working on my dissertation, he always said, just remember, great works of art can never be completed. They must be abandoned. And I think that was just him giving me an out. But
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but sometimes, like for example, there were one or two other people who I could have talked to, but we literally didn't have the money to do the shoot.
Mm-hmm.
You just get to the point, you say, is it worth digging into our own accounts for the money that it's going to cost to shoot that day? And then you have to make a decision. But the names that I told you, especially Tony LoBianco and Joel Schumacher, are the two I really wish I had been relentless about, and I wasn't.
Yeah. The other question I have is, what story did you get that was either shocking or you didn't see coming, or something you didn't know maybe at
Larry?
all? Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, I got hours of that.
Okay, good.
There is no one story. I mean, I tell you the one story that, and this will make sense to you. Now, Larry told me he took credit for the car chase in the French Connection. That somehow I
From
think
Freakin'?
he might have been considered to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And because Phil D'Antoni had produced Bullet, they were looking for another car chase. And Larry is a New Yorker. Pardon me. I think Larry is a New Yorker, said, why don't you have a chase between a car and a subway? And I've heard Friedkin say that he came up with it, but I'm leaning towards believing Larry because it's an outrageous concept. And that was the ballpark that Larry would play in on a regular basis, the outrageous concept. The other thing is how well I think the story, and it's in the movie, where he was driving a taxi cab on the sidewalk in the streets of New York.
Yep.
Without permits, without stunt people and everything like that. That takes really big balls.
it's New York. Don't get out of the way.
They'll get out of the way. Yeah.
But he's right. That's the other thing. But still, you go, man, that's dangerous shit. And it was important that we talked to his first wife, giving him a lot of crap about that. But, God, so many stories, so many hours of stuff.
But she, in the documentary, she doesn't even come off as sometimes exes can, with hate filled or a lot of anger. I didn't get any of that when you were talking to her.
I don't think anybody hates Larry. I think he's just hard to put up with sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
His Cynthia, his delightful, wonderful wife. Every once in a while, I think we'd gone to a couple of festivals, and every once in a while, Larry is being, no, I don't want to eat there. I want to go eat in there, and she sort of look at me like, look at him today. But Larry was Larry. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think anybody hated Larry.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of anybody who didn't, wasn't sort of charmed by him on some level. Yeah, he could be a handful. He always gave me a heart. Oh, 7-Ups give you a great.
Yeah.
We're having a conversation about the 7-Ups, and I told him how much I liked the movie, and he says, they fucked it up. The car chase should have been at the end. I said, no, Larry, it should have been in the middle, because the car chase in the middle propels the last act of the picture. Right. No, you don't know what you're talking about. They fucked it up. It should have been in the end. I said, no, Larry. And then he went and he said to me, if I want you to disagree with me, I'll tell you to. And, and we had lots of those conversations in the kitchen over coffee, over cappuccino. And
some of that's just being a friend. Chad and I are arguing a point for 10, 15 years that I just haven't given in to, even though I know he's right.
Well, you know what happens that you've achieved wisdom and maturity.
I think I admitted to him a few years ago he might be right.
Yeah. Well, I remember one night because I'm from New York, when you're in your 20s, everything is combat. Like, what the fuck do you mean you like that? How fucking stupid I mean,
Yep.
it's every cliche in the world. And I'll never forget, I had a 3-hour argument with a friend of mine about who was the better composer, Jerry Goldsmith or John Williams. And of course, by the time it was done, we were just worn out and it was a complete stalemate. Um, but I remember, I think I smoked half a pack of cigarettes during that argument. I mean, it was epic. And it was just because we were young and
Yeah.
and from New York.
Right. And by the way, back to some of his movies, I can't imagine going into a theater and you've got to put yourself at the time and place, right? Things and watching Bone
Hmm.
and have
I
it and then
didn't see Bone in the
either
theater, actually, by the way. I only saw Bone on home video.
yeah.
That had eluded me.
Yeah, I saw it a few years ago, and I think I may have actually caught that. Turner Classic Movies does a great job, and that's probably where I caught the Seven Ups too.
Mhm.
Of if you Friday, Saturday night, sometimes they have that late night cinema, and you can catch some really good things, and
Well,
sometimes things that are out of print.
has been on that late night, midnight slot or whatever it is.
Hmm.
The Underground, I think
The
TCM.
Underground, yeah. It's a great way to catch some stuff, but you have to be looking for it.
Yes. Yeah.
So back to where watching this unfold, and maybe you thought this was if it was sold as a horror film, you go in and watch this. Can you imagine?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've always maintained that if Bone had been a hit, and Bone was, we talk about it in the documentary that nobody knew what the hell to do with it.
Right.
But had Bone been a hit, I think Larry's career would have been totally different because inside Larry was, I think, a playwright.
Uh-huh.
Larry loved the theater. He would go to New York literally just to go to the theater. Um, and the Bone is clearly something that could have been done as a play,
Right.
honestly. And I think because people didn't go see it, and Larry was always about the money. He wanted to make money as a producer, but he said to me once, he said, I want asses in the seats to see my movies.
Yep.
And so that's how he started to take these odd combos of social commentary and put them together with genre. And, someone asked me well after I'd finished making the movie, says, what is the connective tissue in Larry Cohen's work? Which was a good question that I'd never even thought of. And I realized, I thought about it for a second. I said, well, Larry was a critic. He was a social critic, that all of his movies have something to say. And all of his movies are really about something other than the exploitation hook.
Right.
Uh, you know, and that's why I mean, listen, I'd be the first one to admit I don't think all of Larry's movies are perfect. I don't think all of Larry's movies really quite stack up. But I will say this, they are never not interesting.
That's right. I mean, Q, and there was I'm not a huge fan of the stuff, although the stuff is one of those that people talk about all the
Thank you. The fact that people are insane for this stuff drives me nuts.
Oh, okay. So
I just don't understand where it comes from.
I didn't mean to offend. So there's two things. I was like, oh shit, probably shouldn't have said it. It was like the animation style for G.I. Joe because I didn't mean any offense. But I was thinking about that earlier. I was like, but also at the time, the reason that G.I. Joe doesn't and Transformers, you're watching on a 20-inch screen.
Sure.
Now you're watching it 60 in high def, and there are no flaws to be hid.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
and the stuff it's probably my least favorite, like Q, even Return to Salem's Lot, because that's probably introduced me to Sam Fuller anyway when I was younger. But I never understood the stuff. It's the one that
very quickly, I'll tell you, the Q is my favorite because it's a combination of monster movie and crime movie in New York, in
Yeah.
gutter New York. Irresistible to me. My second favorite, it's a very close second, is The Ambulance, because the
James Earl
combination
Jones.
the idea is out of its mind, and it's got a comics connection. The thing about the stuff is, on as an idea, the stuff is great, but I also felt that it felt like it was a first draft of a better movie.
I agree completely.
You
I
feel like
didn't know Chad had watched it.
I don't know if he had completely really thought it through. And as you see in the doc, um, Larry rewrote a lot in the moment and on the set. And
Mhm.
I think the idea for the stuff was great, But if you started to pull it apart, it seems like it's two or three different little movies within the movie.
Yeah, the whole third act with Paul Sorvino, it just doesn't
Yeah.
fit the first part. Yeah, I completely agree.
But I will say this, it's still interesting.
Yeah, everything he did, even the bigger budget things like Phone Booth. Phone Booth, you're absolutely right, has something to say.
Phone Booth is a really good movie, actually.
It is. It
It
is.
is.
And it's efficient. One of the things that I'm very, aware of now as I get older is efficiency in storytelling. And all the great movies, make a list of your 10 favorite movies. I bet you they're all pretty efficient.
Yep.
I mean, King Kong, which is an antique, is an incredibly efficient piece of storytelling. And if you can tell the story and you can tell it quickly and directly and emotionally, it's going to work. And Phone Booth is what, 82 minutes?
Barely, man. It
Yeah,
might be barely 82
Hey, listen, a
minutes.
chopping mall is
Yeah.
only 78 minutes. So,
Right.
I'm not for short, but I am for efficient movies and storytelling. And, Larry, for the most part, was very good at doing that. He never overstayed his welcome.
Yep.
In fact, I've been asked, just getting back to King Kong for a second, because why not?
No, we love talking about it.
Why don't you make it longer? And I said, I didn't want to overstay my welcome. And I will tell you something else. You're talking about, even if you don't know Larry, and the movie passed what I call the wives and girlfriends test. The guys like you would go,
Mm-hmm.
maybe their wives or girlfriends would go, well, I never heard of this guy. Who's this guy? Some of the best compliments I got were from the wives and the girlfriends saying, I never heard of this guy. He's great. And I've said this a lot, but I'll say it again for your audience, is the most important thing in any story are great characters. And Larry's a great character. You become involved with him, you've become fascinated by him. And then, the trick then is not to overstay your welcome. I could have made a 2.5-hour movie and not broken a sweat.
Yeah.
But
Well,
and some people said maybe at an hour and 40, I think it's about an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
It might have been a little too long. I said, no, I don't think it was too long.
No, it wasn't too long. And I'll give you one more compliment. I watched it probably about 9 months ago, well before I ever knew we were going to do this, had no inkling that we were going to do this. And then my wife I'm in the basement, and this is where all this madness takes place. And she came down after the kid was asleep and she goes, what the hell's this? And I tried to explain it to her. And she's in the movies. And then she sat down, and you're right. We finished it late that night because she was completely into it and interested into his career. So congratulations, my man.
Well, thanks. The whole experience was very gratifying for me. I don't know what I expected I was going to make when I had the idea, but in the process of doing all the interviewing, and then especially with Larry, again, you hunt, you gather, and then you find the narrative. But it's weird. I watch it and I find it interesting to watch just as a viewer.
Yeah.
I didn't know that could ever really happen.
That's awesome.
We were very lucky. We were very lucky to get the people we got. We were very lucky. Larry helped get us get J.J. Abrams. A quick thing. I had the J.J. story in the back of the movie as kind of an Easter egg, or like one of those Marvel cutaways in the middle of the end credits. And Larry started beating the crap out of me. He said, "You're an idiot. You should have it up front. He's a star. He's a big deal." And I said, "Yes, Larry. Okay, Larry. I'll take care of it, Larry." And then I said to my guys, I said, "Yeah, he was right.
He was right. It's a great way to start it out. And it's a good story.
It's a tone setter." And the other thing is, I remember going to a seminar one night with Ed Zwick and Dick Wolf a long, long time ago. And Ed Zwick said something I never forgot. He said, apropos of nothing, he said, "It can always be shorter and funnier." And once I discovered there was a lot of funny with Larry, I said that was going to be one of my spines. Always look for the funny.
Yep.
And the he said thing between him and Fred Williamson, was one of the first things that we cut, and in many ways was a little bit of a tone setter in the rest of the picture. Yep. And I was able to get that with Moriarty with the hair pieces, which was great. And then, Fred and Larry again on original Gangstas going back and forth. So I was also able to do that thing which they teach you in screenwriting school, which is, setups and payoffs.
Yep.
But again, I didn't know we were going to do that. It's just that's content dictates form when you're doing a documentary, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Man,
Well,
we have,
I
we have
know
run, you've got one more question, James.
I was
because
to
we
say,
have
I know
run
we're
him to
almost
the
out of
end.
time, but I have to
Yeah.
ask this because I've been burned by IMDb before.
Yeah.
I love King Cohen. Is the listing that you're working on a film about comic fans who become comic legends?
Yeah, very, very quickly. One of the projects I want to do is a thing called True Believers, which is about the first generation of comics fans that became pros. And it's kind of my story because
Mhm.
I was part of that group. But it's really about, if you know anything about the history of comics, is guys did comics because they couldn't get illustration work, they couldn't get magazine work, they couldn't get newspaper strip work, and comics paid fast. Well, the blue jean generation, as I call them, they wanted to do comics as they wanted to do comics. And I have a Patreon page called True Believers, which is something, which we're going to use for fundraising when the time comes. During COVID, it was silly to even start. But
Mhm.
what I did is, for anybody who subscribes to it, I do a podcast talking about my experiences in comics. And when I first started doing it, I was doing 20 minutes or something like that on a topic. And now I'm doing them like twice a month. And I have my friend Cy Voris is a screenwriter, and I've done a couple. Mark Chiarello, who's my friend who worked at DC's the art director for so many years.
Mhm.
He and I did one, and it went so well. We're going to do another one, I think, next week. And now, so we have a whole bunch of content where I talk about my comics past and my experiences and the people who I knew. And like I said, they started out being around 15 to 20 minutes, and, and now they're all basically somewhere in the vicinity of an hour. And my partner said, he said, don't look at the clock. As long as it's interesting, keep going. So that's kind of what we're doing. So the Patreon page, the True Believers Patreon page, has hours of me
Wow.
gabbing about comics and my experiences.
So
Excellent.
they can go to Patreon and just type in search in True Believers and get access that
That's
way.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And basically we created it because when we decide we're going to do a Kickstart for that, you have to create the awareness before you start the Kickstart. All of which I didn't know when I tried to do it for King Cohen, by the way. I was a spectacular failure at it. But luckily I now am partnered with people who know how to do things I don't know how to do.
That's always the
I
best way
am
to go.
looking forward to that. So thank you for letting us know about that because
Yeah, I almost
as
forgot, which just shows you what a lummox I am.
No, we try to take care of our folks. Good job.
Well, you guys are great, and I have to say adios in a minute or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if there's something that you missed, or if you want to have me back, just let me know. I had a great time talking with you guys.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and sign off, and then we'll just go ahead and say bye. Thanks, Steve, so much. It's been Steve Mitchell on Bonehead. Thank you for coming by, sharing so many great stories. We could have sat here and talked to you about Larry for the next hour. James and Chad could have talked to you about
Batman and about writing a character named Snow Job.
Did I
You know.
write a character named Snow Job?
Well, he's an eye for an eye.
Oh, okay. Okay. I will tell you one quick Batman related thing. I was working for Neil Adams at his studio Continuity Associates, and Alan Kupperberg and I worked with Neil and Dick Giordano, who were partners. And one night, I think it was around 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, most of the guys had gone home, and I'm sitting there and I think I'm doing backgrounds for Giordano on something. And then Neil, who I was always somewhat terrorized by, yells, Mitchell. And I go, what did I do? What did I fuck up? Because I thought he was going to give me a lot of shit about doing something wrong. And he said, you're going to be Bigger Melvin. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're going to be Bigger Melvin, so don't move. And Bigger Melvin is a character in the famous Batman Joker story. I think the Joker's 5-Way Revenge or something like that. It was written by Denny, pencil and ink by Neil, and I'm one of the characters in there that the Joker kills. So I not only have a long-standing relationship with Batman as an inker, but I also was a character.
Well,
And
it's
like my baseball card, it sets me apart. And you notice how I paid something off that we set up in the first
I
hour?
know. That's what I was about to say. Listen, Bonehead Weekly people, we brought it back 360 just in there. Steve, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We'd love to have you back anytime you want to come on the show.
My great pleasure. As you can tell, I once you wind me up, I never stop.
We love that. All right. This has been Bonehead.